This is the March 14th, 2023 regular meeting followed by a work session of the Pinehurst Village Council. We welcome you all here. If you are following this meeting on the live stream as opposed to being here in Village Hall, and if you are listening on live stream and wish to make any comments to the Village Council tonight under our public comment time, you may send a message by email to the village clerk. That email can be addressed to publiccomments@vopnc.org. That's publiccomments@vopnc.org. Those comments will be received and distributed to the council and appropriate staff at a later date. If you are here in Village Hall attending the meeting and you wish to make comments to the council at the end of our regular session, there is a sign-up sheet in the rear of the room. If you will sign that, please, and the village clerk will bring that to me at the appropriate time on our agenda, and I'll call on you one at a time to make whatever comments you wish to make. Having done that, we'll move on to item number 2 in our agenda for this evening, and that includes reports from the village manager and the village council members, and we'll start, therefore, with Jeff Sanborn. Jeff.
All right, thank you, John. Just one thing I'd like to comment on, and that is to recognize Alex Cameron. We're really pleased to announce that Alex has accepted our offer to be our next Planning and Inspections Department head. Alex has been with the village, I think, for 7 or 8 years now, and he was hired as a Planner 1. And over the years, he's progressed from Planner 1 to Planner 2 to Senior Planner, and more recently to Principal Planner. And it's just been awesome to watch his growth and development over the years. We had 5 folks involved in our hiring panel, and Alex was our unanimous number 1 selection. So we were really excited when we made the offer, and he accepted that offer. So effective yesterday, Alex became our Planning and Inspections Department head.
Thank you, Jeff. And Alex, on behalf of my council colleagues and myself, we wish you a good stewardship over the planning and zoning issues of the village. It's a very difficult job, and as Jeff mentioned, you've been well trained for it and developed so well over the last few years. So congratulations on that appointment. As always, we look forward to working with you and your staff. Congratulations. I'll move into reports from the village council and myself. Village manager and I, on March the 10th, attended the latest meeting of the new Metropolitan Planning Organization structure, which we will be forming with other towns here in Moore County in the next few months. We'll talk more about that tonight in the work session. We're going to add some discussion about that for the council's benefit and the public as well. Net of all that meeting we had the other day, Jeff, what happens is we and the other towns get more points for DOT projects, which will be helpful in working with DOT on projects and prioritization of those into the future. It's more complicated than all that, but it was a very good orientation, and again, we'll be discussing that later in the meeting. I made brief comments to the number 6 Homeowners Association and also to the Pinehurst Rotary in the last week or so, and enjoyed participating, as I know some of you did, in the St. Patrick's Day Parade. I also want to make note of the opening on March 27 of the Cancer Center, the Pinehurst Comprehensive Cancer Center. I'm sure everybody is generally aware of this. I've had the chance to tour the facility, as many of you have also, and if you haven't, I encourage you to do so. This is an amazing, and that would be spelled with all capital letters in my view, amazing new healthcare facility for the village of Pinehurst, certainly, but also the whole of Central, North, and South Carolina. The extraordinary work that went into the planning of this building, the detail of how to take care of patients, how to take care of physicians, how to administer all the care that will be received there is extraordinarily good. And it'll be a wonderful facility for everybody to have available to us here in Pinehurst. The last part of my comments tonight will be that we've identified another centenarian in our midst. Vivian Cunningham will be 100 years old this Saturday. I have a certificate here that we'll be awarding to her. I think Councilmember Pizzella will join me in that since he's been helpful in identifying her. And as I say that, I just encourage the rest of you to let us know if you have residents of Pinehurst whom you know that are about to be 100 or have just turned 100 years old. We're delighted to have that certificate available for any and all. Having completed that, I'll move to comments from other council members. And Jeff Morgan, would you like to start tonight?
I've got no reports, thank you.
Jane?
Thank you. I have a couple of things. One is that the Moore County tax revaluation is almost done, and the notices of revaluation are going to be mailed out on the 17th of March, right on St. Patrick's Day, if you can believe it. There will then be informational workshops for anybody who's got a question about their revaluation that are informal and held at the Agricultural Center up in Carthage, where you can actually drop in Monday through Friday from 9 to 3:30 in the afternoon during the last week of March and the first 2 months of April. And then for anyone who wants to bring a formal appeal, those can be done also at the Agricultural Center, but for those you have to have an appointment. And they will be held during Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursdays, every week in May and June, again from 9 to 3:30. Second of all, the Beautification Committee met on March the 6th, and they've got a lot of things going on, but one of the things I want to let everybody know about is that the Pinehurst Garden Club, which is a private club but works with the Beautification Committee and does an awful lot for the appearance of the village, is holding its annual plant sale from now through April 7th. And you can go on the Pinehurst Garden Club website and find out how to pre-order your plants. And then pickup day is April 23rd up at Garden Haven Garden Center in Carthage. And that's a wonderful thing to way to get garden plants for the season. The proceeds of that go to the scholarship that the Garden Club provides for landscape design students at Sand Hills Community College. Also, the Beautification Committee is working on its first annual new Warren Manning Award for landscaping, which they hope to bestow in July. And they're also completing the landscaping of the solar eclipse monument on Ritter Road. I don't know if anybody's really aware of, I was never aware of the solar eclipse monument. What are you talking about, solar eclipse? Well, it turns out that in 1900, in May of 1900, there was a solar eclipse, and the line of totality ran right through the village, and there is a monument to that on Ritter Road, which the the Beautification Committee has been involved in sprucing up so that it's now visible and looks very nice. And then third of all, the Pinehurst Business Partners had their board meeting yesterday, and I just want to remind everybody that on April the 15th, they are hosting the Dog Jog or Dog Dash. The name seems to be a little bit amorphous, but it's going to start at 9:30 in the morning at Tufts Memorial Park, and it will involve a walk with your dog to the Arboretum. It's $15 to register your dog. And then there'll be an event, a celebratory event at the Arboretum, or if you just want to go to the Arboretum, that's free. And proceeds from that go to the Linden Lodge Wellness Center, Mental Wellness Center. And in order to pre-register, there is, this is under Linden Lodge Dog Dash on Facebook. I'm not all that Facebook savvy, but I think it just go on the Pinehurst Business Partners website, and you can get from there onto their Facebook page. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Lydia?
Thank you. I just want to quickly add some comments about Darren. I had not Darren, excuse me, Alex. Had a couple of situations last year that really impressed me. I sat in at the end of the year in continuing legal education on updates in North Carolina planning law, and I was absolutely amazed at everything he has to know and stay on top of to do his job. And then second, I have sat in on meetings with him in the public, and he explains things beautifully. He's got their respect. They walk away understanding what we're doing and why we're doing. So I think you're going to be a great addition in that position. So congratulations, Alex.
Thank you, Lydia. Patrick?
Full disclosure, my dog and myself will be in that Sandhills Dog Parade. We've already pre-registered. Just want the public to know. And then
Are
we
you
also,
jogging or dashing?
Yeah.
we have to have a discussion, my dog and I. But we were also in the St. Patrick's Day Parade. On a more serious note, I do obviously want to echo the mayor's statement about the certificate of congratulations to a resident of ours who's had a long life, still going strong at 100 this Saturday, and look forward to presenting that to her. And also, Jane mentioned that the beautification committee, and they continue to impress me. I went to that meeting and sat there and just listened to the detail and knowledge they have about literally all the plants in this village. It just block by block, when to plant them, when not to plant them, which plants are okay, which are not. And these are volunteers, and they work with the staff, and you can really see they enjoy their work, and they are really helping the village. And the chairman, Janet Farrell, runs a terrific meeting. The other thing I wanted to mention to the public here and those that are listening, that there are avenues to stay in contact with the village that I think our residents underutilize. We all know about MyVOP, and I encourage people who are not on that to utilize it. I myself have utilized it as recently as a couple of weeks ago to have a minor thing corrected. But there's also, you can sign up by going to our website to get regular email updates from the village about announcements of events, announcements of council meetings, of planning and zoning board meetings. So residents shouldn't be too startled, like, how did I miss that meeting? I didn't know about that. All you have to do is sign up and get on an email list, and the clerk sends out this information. We have a surprisingly few amount of our residents, or number of people, I'm assuming they're residents, on this list of a community of 17,000. I found out we only have 142. So please, if you've got an interest, it's a very easy thing to sign up for. And you don't have to do anything after you sign up. Things will hit your inbox. And the same thing is, we have another vehicle called Engage Pinehurst. Another vehicle for you to sit at your desk at home or your laptop in the kitchen, and you can make suggestions and provide feedback to the village. So I encourage our residents to participate to the full extent that they'd like to. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Patrick, thank you. We'll move on then to item number 3 on our agenda tonight. That's a motion to approve the consent agenda, which includes regular meeting and work session minutes and 2 draft resolutions. Before I ask for a motion, is there any part of the consent agenda which a member of the council wants to discuss or withdraw for later discussion?
Just one
Patrick?
question. Are we going to, we have 2 resolutions. Are we going to address those separately, or are they going to be part of the consent agenda?
They're in the consent agenda.
Okay,
There's a draft.
I'm
of that.
fine with them. I just wondered if there was going to be some sort of...
No, they're all in the consent agenda.
Okay.
Yep, that's fine.
Fine.
Thank you. With that question answered, then, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda, please?
I approve too.
There's a motion from Pat Pizzella. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Jane Hogeman. All in favor of adopting the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Move on into item number 4. And this is a time when the council and the staff have available tonight to do one of the things we love to do most, and that is to honor people who have provided their time and their expertise to the village in participating, especially on our appointed boards. And tonight we're honoring the immediate past chair of the Historic Preservation Commission, Eric Von Salson. And Eric, if you would join me here, I have a resolution I'd like to read. Thank you. I'm making sure I have your resolution, not the centenarian's resolution tonight. 20 years or so, I got that. All right. Is this microphone working? Thank you. Eric, on behalf of the council, I really want to thank you for the excellent work you provided and the guidance to our documents and all the considerations you had to make over the years with the many projects. So on behalf of the council, let me read this to you, please. Whereas the Village Council of Pinehurst, North Carolina, wishes to acknowledge and express its appreciation to Mr. Eric Von Salson for his dedicated service to the citizens of Pinehurst as a member of the Pinehurst Historic Preservation Commission, and whereas Mr. Von Salson was appointed to the Historic Preservation Commission on January 1st, 2019, and appointed as chair on June 1st, 2020, where he served continuously and faithfully. And whereas Mr. Von Salson was instrumental in the efficient operation of the Historic Preservation Commission, always conducting the village's business in a courteous and professional manner. And whereas Mr. Von Salson was involved in many decisions affecting the character of the community, each time exhibiting sound judgment and concern for the health, safety, and welfare of the village of Pinehurst and its important historic qualities in his decision-making process. Whereas Mr. Von Salson was instrumental in revising the Village of Pinehurst Historic District Guidelines adopted in 2019, and whereas Mr. Von Salson played a key leadership role as chair on significant projects within the Village of Pinehurst Historic Commission. Now therefore, be it resolved by the Village Council of the Village of Pinehurst, North Carolina, in regular session assembled this 28th day of February 2023 as follows. That the Village Council hereby expresses, on behalf of the citizens of Pinehurst, deep appreciation and gratitude for the gifts of time, ability, and determination given as a member of the Historic Preservation Commission. Eric, congratulations. Thank you. No comments needed? Thank you. We'll move on then to item number 5. Jeff, would you like to introduce that?
Well, I see Dana's all ready to go. She's got 3 topics for you. One is a very minor change to the fund balance policy, changing some minor terminology there. And then the second one's a new policy requirement that we're trying to come up to speed with. And then the third is a request for you to close out the special revenue fund for ARPA.
Dana, welcome.
Thank you.
Lead us.
All right, so as Jeff said, this first resolution is a minor change to the fund balance policy, just to update the reference to the comprehensive annual financial report that is currently in the policy and change that to the annual comprehensive financial report, which that terminology was changed by the Government Accounting Standards Board, who governs the accounting for the village. This is just to be consistent with that change in terminology. And also to make sure that we are addressing the inclusive issue that is at the basis of the change.
Are there any questions from council about this particular resolution here? Okay, everybody understand what we've got? All right. I believe we need a motion for this.
I move to approve Resolution 23-07, amending terminology in the fund balance policy in accordance with generally accepted government's GASB.
Right.
Statement number 98.
That's a motion by Lydia Bosch. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Pat Pizzella. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Dana, thank you very much. We'll move on into item number 6.
Yep, so the next resolution is to adopt a grants allowable cost and cost principles policy. When we accepted the ARPA funds, there are a number of policies that are required by the federal grant compliance requirements to be written. This is one of them, and it's the only one that was not already addressed by written policies at the village. So we do need to adopt this policy in order to fully comply with the requirements of the ARPA funds that we have received and will hopefully be closing out tonight.
Any questions for Dana on this item? Lydia?
I did have one question. This is extensive. Do you get guidance from the School of Government or League Municipalities? Okay.
Yes.
I suspected you did, but just wanted you to confirm it. You didn't
Yes,
create
so
this?
I wrote the policy starting with a template from the School of Government, combined with knowledge and experience I have from writing similar policies at other institutions.
Okay, that's all. That's it.
Any other questions on this? Is there a motion, please, on item number 6?
I'll move to approve Resolution 2308, adopting a grants allowable costs and cost principles policy.
That's a motion by Jane Hogeman.
Second.
Is there a second from Pat Pizzella? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Dana, we'll go to item number 7, please.
Yep. So the final item tonight is the ARPA Special Revenue Fund. So we have fully expended the total award amount of over $5.2 million using salaries and benefit expenditures from the general fund for general government services as allowed by the grant. The original budget ordinance that was passed establishing the Special Revenue Fund had an estimated budget at the time of over $4.8 million. We need to increase that budget in the Special Revenue Fund to accommodate the full amount of the award and expenditures, and then be able, and authorize the transfer of all of those funds from the Special Revenue Fund to the general fund, to reimburse the general fund essentially for the government services, salaries, and benefits. And in addition, there was over $100,000 in investment income earned on the $5.2 million to date through February that we are also allowed to use to support those expenditures.
I had one question on this. What is the $29,000? Was that an overage or an?
Yes, so I just took the total salary and benefit expenditures for each of those departments, and it happens to be over the total amount by $29,000. So essentially what we will report to the federal government in the final report that is due in April will just be up to the $5,296,000 and change that we were awarded. So I'll reduce one of those departments for the final expenditure report.
Right, right. So this all, as Jeff and the staff came up with some months ago, this has all worked out very well for us, the way we handle these ARPA funds and the way they've been accounted for, covered us, added some money to the fund balance by using these funds for other purposes.
Yep.
Right. Are there other questions of Dana? Lydia?
I do, and I kind of want to walk through this because I went back to my files, and the very first time we got a memo on this was 2021, and that's when we were going to get a lump sum, and we were going to have to be careful about how we spent it. And then there was a change, and I think we heard about it last year. If you were awarded 20 million or less, you
10
didn't.
million.
Huh?
10 million, the first 10 million.
But if you got under a certain threshold, which we did, you didn't have to, there weren't all the requirements, reporting requirements to the government. So at that time, I recall that we were going to use the funds to pay salaries and benefits, but the amount of those funds would then increase our fund balance, or however we did the accounting. But that amount, the $5,296,751, would still be available for capital projects, or so. What I guess, and not my concern, maybe is my concern, that yes, we have spent this amount on these salaries and benefits, but we still have this amount that can be used for the library, I just want to make sure my thought process
It was
is.
for any purpose. I think Dana and Jeff can make comments on
Can I
that.
just raise this, and this might make it, simplify it, the 5.2, we had budgeted that, more or less, for our S&E, or what do we call, salaries and expenses account, generally speaking.
Yes.
So what we have done is just replace one with the other. Is that-
Right. A way to think about it maybe is that instead of expending our general fund funds for this, we use this for these salary and benefits, which left an equal amount of general fund funds unspent.
But how do we keep this number in mind as we think about the expenses of the library or any other?
We don't.
Is
It
it?
just increases our resources.
We can apply it any way we want.
Well, I know we can. I don't want to lose sight of the fact that we got a whole lot of money from the government that is still available for use for capital needs. 'Cause we all know we've got some significant capital needs on the horizon, and this can be used for that. And I don't want to lose sight of the fact that that we got a whole lot of money, and it's still there to be used for
We won't-
beneficial projects.
We won't lose sight of it because it increased our available fund balance at the end of this year, which
Yes.
goes into our 5-year planning process.
Okay, okay.
Yes, these funds, initially, I know there was discussion from what I had looked back in different notes of using these for capital projects that were allowed under the guidelines. But then when the final rule came out and that allowed this, if you, the $10 million kind of allowance, if you will, where you could just sort of almost no questions asked, very few requirements, use that to reimburse salaries and benefits or any general government services. By electing to do that, we essentially are spending this 5.2 million on those salaries and benefits. But as Jeff has said, we're supplanting those dollars that would have otherwise been spent in the general fund, thereby freeing up other regular general fund dollars, whether you, in your mind, if you think of it as, okay, those are now tax revenues that aren't being spent on salaries and benefits because this is covering it. Therefore, that's being added now to fund balance. Or we did increase capital projects in FY23, partially, I'm sure, because of knowing that you would have this to offset some of those. So it's just sort of shifting the use of the dollars within the general fund. But we do not have any ongoing requirements after the final report is done in April related to these funds and after the audit is completed at the end of the fiscal year. So any of the requirements in terms of spending it for capital, we're done.
I think it's important to have this discussion because for the public to know how we have accounted for this $5 million and how we still plan to keep our eye on this $5 million. It's sitting in fund balance now.
Right.
But it's available for significant capital needs if we so choose to spend it that way.
Dana, correct me if I'm misstating this, we had to do this because the ARPA money had only a limited shelf life, whereas our salary expenses has a longer shelf life. Was that one of the driving factors?
Yeah, it was a consideration. We didn't really, I don't think, had to do it. It was the easiest way to process this money because other ways we might have spent it on nearer-term capital requirements or operating expenses or other things had significantly more burdensome documentation requirements tied to them.
Correct. Yeah, for example, if you did use this to fund a capital project, there are federal purchasing requirements, a lot more documentation and reporting that's required, yes. So this was definitely the simplest method, the path of least resistance, but to where there is still a huge benefit, obviously gained to the village in terms of having additional fund balance, netted at the end of the year, that then can be used prudently through our typical strategic operating budget process and the 5-year plans for capital.
And ultimately, this approach led to the most flexible possible application of the resource.
Yes.
And Jeff, I believe you've told us in the past on this also that this way of applying the funds was quite common among those of us in this amount of receipt and
I
government.
think in the end, nearly every local government did it this way that fell under that threshold.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
I know at least for, from some of the School of Government resources that I had read, this was basically their recommended use of the funds because of how simple and linear it was.
Right, and allows flexibility, as you've said, to do other things that we
Yes.
wouldn't have been able to do if we tried to apply.
Without all the restrictions.
Right.
Correct.
Any other questions from Dana on that then? I believe we have a resolution here too.
I move
And,
to,
or, this one's an ordinance.
Number 7, is it? Yeah.
I move to approve Resolution 2303, amending closing the ARPA Special Revenue Fund.
Second.
That's a motion by Pat Pizzella, a second by Jane Hogeman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Dana, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll now move on to item number 8, which is discussion of amending Chapter 31 of the Pinehurst Municipal Code. This particular item will take a longer period of time to discuss. We have a lot of additions, corrections to add here from the staff. Jeff,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you, John. And this, I think when we started working on this last week, based on a suggestion that came from Pat, we thought this was going to be a pretty easy text amendment to work through. Some background on this. Pat approached us a little over a week ago, I guess, with a very minor suggestion with regard to some of the language pertaining to the qualifications for people to serve on our advisory boards, which are contained in Chapter 31 of the, it says PDO, that should be the municipal code. So it's not in the PDO, it's in the municipal code. But as we started digging through the language in that chapter, we were reminded that there are a whole host of other inconsistencies and points of confusion in the existing language in that chapter that we probably ought to be taking this opportunity to clean up and clarify as well. So what I thought was going to be a simple one-line text amendment wound up being much more extensive. So we've prepared an ordinance for you to approve if we get to that point tonight, but there's a lot here, and I recognize that you might have some further things, observations on how we might improve this suggested language. So again, this is Chapter 31 of the Municipal Code, and it starts out with a discussion of the Planning and Zoning Board under 31.2.1, which is the appointment process for members. You can see my suggested edits there. I added the words minus vacancies in recognition of the fact that sometimes we do have vacancies, and I don't want somebody to be able to point to the fact that our ordinance says there must be 9, and then suggest that our planning and zoning board therefore can't conduct business if we have 1 or 2 vacancies because we're interviewing new people and we just haven't appointed people to fill those vacancies. So just kind of a minor thing there. And then the suggestion to add full-time there along with residents obviously makes sense, I think. And then for the duration of their service to the board, I think this was the original suggestion that Patrick made, if I recall correctly. And so the notion is that if somebody does move outside of the village of Pinehurst, then their term on the Planning and Zoning Board would terminate. I don't think that's controversial, but that's not the way it's currently written. And then I added that language about the quorum requirement at the end.
What is
because
the
it's not there
quorum
otherwise.
requirement now?
I'm
Is
sorry?
Is there a quorum requirement
Yeah,
now?
there is a quorum requirement, it's just not stated in the,
Okay.
in the ordinance, so.
Does the Planning and Zoning Board have a set of its own rules for conducting meetings?
Alex, you want to?
For the record, Alex Cameron is joining Jeff Sanborn, Alex being our newly appointed head of planning. Alex, thank you.
So currently, all our planning advisory boards, so the Historic Preservation Commission, Board of Adjustment, and the Planning and Zoning Board all have adopted rules of procedure. One of the changes with Chapter 160D was it allowed for the local advisory boards to adopt their own rules of procedure, or the governing board could adopt them for their subsequent advisory board. So they do, and inside those rules of procedure, meeting decorum, faithful attendance of meetings, meeting schedules, and it also does discuss the quorum and sometimes, not to the detailed membership that this chapter of the municipal code does, but the majority of the board constitutes a quorum, and that does not include any recusals for any cases or vacancies. So vacancies aren't computed in meeting that majority requirement. But if someone had an excused absence even, still, that quorum still must be the majority of the seating members or the membership that is filled.
But minus vacancies. If we had 2 vacancies, the quorum would still be 5, is that correct? Or would we
Fairly certain
reduce-
that's the way we have typically interpreted it. Now, that's a good question, John, because the way this is worded, we're saying that the 9 doesn't apply when we have vacancies, so.
Has there
We can work
ever-
on that.
Yeah.
Has there ever been a problem? No, so, for example, the council is supposed to have 5 members, but there have been times when a member has left before the end of their actual term, and you've had to fill somebody, so there's been a period of a few weeks or something when we were missing a member. But has anybody ever challenged that the council could meet during that time?
No.
Maybe we don't need to add the reference to minus vacancies.
Well, that meets another purpose, which I think was Jeff's idea, and I agree with that purpose. It's just a question of how do we handle a quorum? If there were hypothetically 2 vacancies for an extended period of time, for whatever reason. Well, we think about that and keep going through the
Yeah.
presentation.
This, my opinion as we're reviewing this, I think the minimum of 5 is a good requirement. They deal with serious issues.
Mm-hmm.
You have a couple vacancies, and you could have another person on vacation.
Yeah.
And before you know it, somehow the meeting can get very
Right.
small. And
Well, I think I'm on firm ground in suggesting that you can require in your policy a higher quorum than would otherwise be required. So to get to this point of whether or not 5 is really the quorum that pertains to, let's say, 8 or 9, or 8 or 7 members versus 9, if the policy says 5, then I
Yeah.
think we're okay.
Yeah, that part I have no
Yeah.
problem with at all.
I agree.
I'm just wondering whether we need to say in the second typed line, minus vacancies. Do we need to even have that language?
I think it's a valid question. Again, I threw that in there out of caution about somebody that might try to look for the little sliver of an opportunity to challenge something that the Planning and Zoning Board did because we only had 7 or 8 members that were actually seated at that time.
Yeah. Good point.
I think it remains minus vacancies.
Sorry?
And I think that it remains. That's a good idea.
What
And we still have a quorum of 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
if we said that the Planning and Zoning Board shall consist of 9 members. You know, 8 of whom shall be full-time residents, and then you get down to the bottom, a minimum of 5 Planning and Zoning Board members must be present to vote in matters concerning the Planning and Zoning Board, and at some point say that temporary vacancies shall not affect the ability of the Planning and Zoning Boards to conduct business, so long as there
Oh.
are at least 5.
That sounds like a more verbose way of just saying minus vacancies.
Comes to the same number. Yeah.
I don't really have a problem with it saying minus vacancies. Another way you could say that shall consist of no more than 9 members. But the minus vacancies, I think, is perfectly appropriate. It's on there.
Should we say that the extraterritorial zoning jurisdiction member shall be a full-time resident as well?
Can we get there?
Yeah, let Jeff get there. Let's go, let's keep it in the
Okay.
page order.
Just to try to go, there's a lot here, so,
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
yeah. All right, so we're done with the first paragraph, I think, right?
I think I understand that better.
No,
Okay.
I'm not done with the first paragraph.
Oh, you're not? Okay.
Okay, so we're saying the Planning and Zoning Board shall consist of 9 members minus vacancies, 8 of whom shall be now full-time residents of the village, and 1 of whom shall be a resident of the ETJ. Well, shouldn't it be a
sorry.
full-time? That's what I'm talking about.
That's fine.
And then, I'm also wondering if we should not go back to at least 1 of whom, because of the wording of the statute that pertains to this, 160D 307.
Right. And as I described this afternoon, I'm not sure what the right answer is. But if you word that way, then you can't say 8 of whom will be residents. Because if 8 must be residents, there's only 1 space available for ETJ. Now, the general statute language requires us to recalculate this at the end of every 10-year census. Now, we just went through a census, like, as I indicated to you in a note earlier today. I'm fairly certain that our ETJ population is under 1/8 of the current village population. And we aren't going to face this question again for 10 more years. So one approach would be to approve it like this, and then recognize that 10 years from now, we're going to have to look at this again. Or we can try to wordsmith this in a way that allows that flexibility in the future. I don't know what that is yet, but there may be a way.
Leave it like it is.
We could say, all of whom shall be full-time residents of the village, except for the required ETJ members who shall be full-time members of the ETJ, full-time residents of the ETJ.
I'm comfortable how it is right now.
It's 2 of us,
Say again, Jeff?
3 of us.
I'm comfortable how it's written now.
You mean the way it's been changed to, or the original way?
With the red letters that are underlined and how it reads, along with the black words, I concur with that.
What about the crossed-out words?
The way it is written in there, which you would assume
As
as it
amended.
reads, is how I accept that. Yes, I have no problem with that. And I have no problem with the words that are being crossed out. This is a standard format.
3 of us agree with this.
Sorry?
3 of us agree with this.
All right, what about Jane's suggestion to add full-time resident requirement in the ETJ?
Just put the phrase.
I agree with
full-time.
that, yeah.
I'm fine with that, too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
I
we
think
can
that's
add that.
important. Otherwise, it's fine.
Okay, paragraph B. So here's one of those inconsistencies that we recognized when we were reading this. If you recall, council fairly recently adopted an updated policy with regard to term limits for the various advisory board members, and you realigned everything so that everybody had a maximum of 3 two-year terms. And as we went back and looked at this, this wasn't consistent with that. What I'm suggesting here is we just call attention to a village policy requirement to identify terms, and that allows future councils the opportunity to modify that term limit requirement as they see fit without having to come back and do a municipal code update. It's not the only way to deal with that. We could go in here and we could specify 2-year terms and a maximum of 3. This seemed like a very simple way to deal with it.
So that's why all the things related to the term limits has been pulled out,
Yeah.
covered in the other,
And we have that existing policy already, so.
right. And all those terms of the Historic Commission and the Planning Board are 2-year terms with a maximum of 6 years or 3 terms altogether.
That's right.
Okay. Everybody got that? Okay, yeah. I see why you pulled out the
Yeah.
term issue. I think that works a little easier.
Get wrapped around an axle if you.
All right. And then this will be a recurring point there at the end of that paragraph. Faithful attendance at the majority of the meetings. The wording for that requirement was different for the Planning and Zoning Board compared to the Board of Adjustments, compared to the HPC folks. And so I tried to make a common recommendation for all 3. You might choose a different way to describe that. Is the majority the right word, or is it, there was an 80% reference somewhere in the previous language for one of them. If we said 80%, is anybody really counting 80%, or is this really just more of an idea, an aspiration,
I think majority sounds reasonable, and I think people who are appointed to a board like this, I think they go in with an expectation that their attendance is a serious matter and that they show up. If there's a scheduling conflict, they all work. I've seen them work it out amongst themselves to a good end result, so I'm fine with it.
And it's rare that we have this issue. I mean, to Patrick's point, we have in the past, and in those cases we've had in the past, the member recognizes it and doesn't seek reappointment. They figure out that they just can't keep up with this. So
I think it's
they're all
important.
volunteers. They're there for the right reasons, and yeah.
I think it's important, though, that the chair of the commission or the head of planning be aware if a particular member is not able to be there or just isn't there frequently.
Yeah.
We ought to know that, or the staff ought to be aware of that. And because it is difficult sometimes to run these commissions if you don't have a quorum there, which we do. It's not really so much of a problem, but something to be aware of in our policy, I think. Do we like them? There was some discussion earlier about faithful attendance and majority.
I like that phrase, faithful attendance.
Is that okay?
A little nervous about the term majority because that's only 51% of the meetings. And I know that we've dropped now the term to only 2 years. So if somebody's, not showing up but still wants to be on it, at least there's only a 2-year term to deal with. But I think 51% isn't, and that's not going to be the case with most people, but once in a while you get somebody who just doesn't show up.
I don't see it. These people are appointed because they care. They do faithfully attend. And I think if attendance starts slipping, it's slipping for some reason. I don't think members of these boards look at this majority and it's like, well, I need to be there 51%, and they either come or they don't come. And if they don't come, it's because there's some reason, something's going on in their life. And John, to your point, I think the chair, the heads of these committees keep an eye on it. I think you guys keep an eye on it. If you start seeing some slippage in attendance, you have a discussion with them. But I'm comfortable with majority because I think you get attendance that's even beyond majority because of what they're doing and because of their commitment to the village.
Most folks are there almost
I think
all
my
the
experience on this, my experience in watching what happens with the boards is that if there is a member who has some issue and isn't going to be able to attend either certain times of the year or whatever, they make that known. And they work with the chair and the staff to plan that in a way that won't affect the performance of the board itself. I think too, Jay, maybe an impossible answer to your question on the majority. The fact we now have 2-year terms rather than 3 also makes it easier to, for someone's term to end and be replaced than it would if it's a 3-year term, and we do have that ability.
Another maybe helpful point is that, like I said, we have had a couple of cases over the years where somebody had trouble just due to other personal commitments. And we all knew, well, I say all, I mean, we knew of those challenges, and I mean, it was, in those cases, the board chair was always working with the person to try to figure out the best solution. We never got to the point where the council removed somebody, but we got to the point where, at the end of the term, there was a conversation between the board chair and that member, and an agreement that they shouldn't seek another term, and so it worked out.
That works.
I served on a few local boards prior to coming on the council, and one of the things when we had issues like this is that we would talk with the individual, and if there was a problem with that, and whether it was a personal scheduling issue or whatever it was, but we never ran into a problem where the individual wasn't willing to recuse themselves from the board themselves, just on there, because they recognized they couldn't do it.
Right.
And so I would think that we're going to have the same commitment here, that people are trying to do it, and if they can't do it, they'll fess up and say, I got to leave.
I agree. Yeah.
I support how it's written.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Okay, so minor edit there on the entry to paragraph C, taking it from a plural to a singular because of the fact that it's one person, not at least one. So it's member versus members there in a couple of cases. And then similarly, terms shall be in accordance with policies adopted by the village council, instead of spelling out the terms there. This versus these, again, singular versus plural, and no other changes, I think, to that paragraph for members.
Well, unless we want to update the reference to section 160A.
And I'll go through, and if council wishes to make a decision this evening on this, with the understanding that all references to the general statutes will be to the correct or updated statute.
Okay, great.
And I'll work with.
The other thing that we could do there is say any member of the board from extraterritorial jurisdiction. Then we don't have to worry about updating it in the future if we should end up having 2 members from the ETJ on the board or something like that.
Any instead of the? You mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that could work.
Good idea.
Yeah.
I support that.
Okay. All right. No changes down through the rest of this. Moving on to the zoning board of adjustments. So this is there's a lot going on here. There's the interplay between the way this section of Chapter 31 was written and what was added later on, which was this joint board concept. And it's part of what was causing a lot of confusion there. So what we'll get down there later on, but you'll see that I struck the joint board stuff and just addressed it in this language for the zoning board of adjustments by recognizing that there will be 9 members and they will all be, when those, it's the same members that are appointed to the planning and zoning board, and when they're appointed to the planning and zoning board, they are also appointed to the zoning board of adjustments. And this issue of primary versus alternates is done by vote of the full 9 members of the zoning board of adjustment. And what I'm attempting to do is to create this language so that it is in compliance with the way our board is operating today. So, any comments on paragraph A?
Just one, is Do we expect the 4 who will serve as alternate members to not stay for the zoning board meeting as long as there are 5 people there?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Sometimes
it,
they do, or-
yeah,
If
and
they want
sometimes
to,
it's
but-
helpful in case the case is continued and a sitting member of the 5 can't be at the next meeting, then there's a requirement that someone have been witness to the hearing in order to make a decision. So we do like to have someone's, but now we do have the video recorded, so someone would have an opportunity to go and review that. But it
How-
can be helpful.
How do we designate the primary members?
Sorry?
How do we designate the
By
primary?
vote of
member?
the full 9 members.
It's full 9 decide on the primary.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
So if there has to be, if the ETJ member has to sit on matters arising from the ETJ, so if there's a variance that comes out of the ETJ, does that mean that the ETJ member has to be one of the primary 5? Or does that mean that the ETJ member can be one of the 4 alternates? And then, I guess the chairman would say to one of the primaries, you've got to give your, step aside from your seat.
I think in accordance with this language, it would be up to the board to decide that. They could take it head-on by making sure that the ETG member is a primary member, or they could have a provision that says anytime a matter is coming before the board that pertains to ETJ property, then that alternate's going to step up.
And so probably that'll go in their rules.
Yeah,
And looking through this, based on what the outcome, what council decides with this, and once a year, the board reviews the rules of procedure and makes necessary changes they need to. So depending on the outcome of the council's decision here, we might need to, it's not a bad idea to review it and make updates anyway.
I think, at least in recent memory, the ETJ member has always been a member of the Board of Adjustment.
They've always been a member that maybe not always sitting for, not for every case, but usually.
yeah, in fact, I think
For a while, it was
whomever
the
the
chair.
ETJ member of the Planning and Zoning Board is, that person has always been on the Board of Adjustment. Maybe not always present, but a
Primary.
primary
Yeah.
member.
I like what Alex said, too, about the alternates attending when they're able. The Board of Adjustment meetings anyway, because you learn an awful lot that way. And the Board of Adjustment, the matters that the Board of Adjustment hears are complex.
Very different than the work of the Planning and
Yes,
Zoning Board, too.
So having the opportunity to attend has got to be helpful for those who may be called upon to be alternates. Do the alternates rotate around, or is it, they take the most senior person first, or how does that work?
Again, the board makes the decisions, but in some cases, it may be a board member who has expressed some interest or has expressed or shown the abilities to maybe ascend. Of course, as turnover happens on the board, or as others who maybe get experience as a chair or vice chair within the board, within the Planning and Zoning Board, it's good to have somebody with that experience that could maybe serve as an officer or vice chair or chair with the Board of Adjustment as well. So it's usually based on either experience, so potentially the most senior members, or any of those who express interest or have some abilities that the board chair and maybe staff have picked up on. Nothing that formal in writing of how the selection goes.
Jeff, the really substantial change here, though, is how the appointments are made. Because the text of our document has been reading one way, but we've been doing it a different way, right? Because the
Well-
members of the Board of Adjustment,
Yes or no?
Are-
I mean, the way we're doing it is different than the existing language here. Not necessarily different than the existing language there. That's what we're doing, this combined planning and zoning board.
you're taking that section out. Because we've already combined them.
Yeah.
And have some years ago. That was the point I was making a bit earlier in written correspondence here.
Yeah.
That the boards were not always a single board. we adopted the policy of a single board, I don't know, 10 years ago,
Yeah.
12
And
probably.
I think that's when this language was inserted. And
Right.
It created inconsistencies. because
Yeah.
it-
Yeah.
you know, we've talked through some of these, some of those in the past, but
Right. So the council still appoints the members of the board and also the chair
yep,
of the Planning and Zoning Board. And the Planning and Zoning Board are all members of the Zoning Board of Adjustment. But the Zoning Board of Adjustment decides which 5 persons will be the primary members of the
4 of
Zoning
the
Board of
5,
Adjustment.
because you appoint the chair.
Correct. Correct. All right. So we understand that.
Yes?
Okay.
All right, so I think I was on C then. So again, this is, again, is all language, or not all of it, but this is language making it singular. And this is that addition of simultaneous appointment for the ETJ as well. There's, I guess I should make you aware, we need to recognize that, and it's written to reflect this, but the fact that the village council doesn't have the authority to appoint the ETJ member. All you do is you recommend a candidate for the county commissioners to
Okay.
appoint. And, you know, I guess it's theoretically possible that they may not want the same person to be sitting on our Planning and Zoning Board as they want sitting on our Board of Adjustments. I don't think that's ever going to come up, but the way this is written, it says you're going to forward, basically you're going to forward one nomination to them. You know, they've always shown deference to whoever the village council wants to nominate, so I don't think it's going to come up as an issue. I think they will always cooperate with this, but I just want to make you aware that that potential exists.
But, okay, so let's say that scenario, we have this language, that scenario comes up.
I'm sorry?
Have this language, which typically works out. But the scenario you just mentioned, what do we do if it comes up?
We
Do it
negotiate.
then?
Well,
I mean, it doesn't
we
seem
could send
very,
another nomination. I mean,
well, it's just, it's pure speculation at this point because this seems to have worked out in the past.
yeah,
And let's hope it continues to work like this. If not, seems like we deal with it if the time comes.
yeah.
Why don't we just say, subject to the confirmation by the Moore County Board of Commissioners? Or something.
Is that consistent with the statute?
Yeah. The statute talks about this 160D 307, subsection B, it talks about extraterritorial representation on the boards. And it says that the county is going to make the selection. So, you know,
Yeah,
But that's what it says here. A vacancy shall be filled by the County Board of Commissioners.
On the
upon the
recommendation.
recommendation.
Yeah, which they're doing, and
right.
We're recommending.
Simultaneous to the appointment of the planning. That's the part that, I mean, if for some reason they just didn't want to do that,
we deal with
They
it.
didn't want to have the same person fill both seats.
yeah,
Then we'd have to come up with
somebody else.
somebody else. So at that point, what we could say is that the
Unless
Person-
the
the
county board
person-
of commissioners
right.
doesn't want to do this, and then we'll send another recommendation or something.
the person who's wherever it is that we say that the person who is the Planning and Zoning Board member from the ETJ shall automatically become the Zoning Board of Adjustment member from the ETJ. There is where we can say, subject to confirmation by the Moore County Board of Commissioners.
I don't think we need to, add that in. I think we're dealing, it's almost a unicorn we're dealing with here. It's never happened, we hadn't had a problem before. And if we actually have one in the future, it's a negotiation thing. I can't see, I just don't envision a county board of commissioners, planting their flag over someone we recommend to be on the zoning board. I just,
Try and write this stuff so that
I understand,
there's
but
something that you
I think-
do. And
I'm
Yeah,
comfortable with the way it's written,
Yeah,
but if there's
I
a better way.
wanted to make you aware of it. Ultimately, I made this recommendation because I really just don't ever think it will come up, but
I wonder if it could happen, though, that, as you mentioned, the county might prefer one person to be on the Board of Adjustment, and another ETJ person to be on the Planning and Zoning Board. And I don't know how that recommendation reads to them. Jeff, do you recall how that reads, or what we're required to say? Does it differentiate when we make that recommendation to the county?
when we make the recommendation, it says, we recommend so-and-so to be appointed as the ETJ representative on our Planning and Zoning Board and our Zoning Board of Adjustment.
So it does cover both?
Yeah.
I see. That answered the question right there. I didn't know if it covered both and we were just going down. So then it works.
Yeah.
I think it works.
Okay, then?
I think we're all right.
Okay.
You're going into meetings?
Just added this happens now, but just to clarify that they should be two separate meetings. And I think that I actually pulled this from, it was written into this joint language. Yeah, separate meetings. So I pulled that up there as well.
Just to be clear, separate meetings, when I've been to their meetings, it means they end one meeting and then they break out.
That's right.
That's fine,
Yeah.
okay.
Different notice requirements too, and all.
We're not requiring them to meet.
Just can't commingle the topics.
Okay.
Okay, so skipping over some historical documentation here about volunteer fire department, and then down into Historic Preservation Commission. Kind of the similar framework on member appointment. I added minus vacancies for the duration of their service on the HPC. Minimum of 4 voting members must be present to vote. That's the quorum requirement. So a very similar framework to what I described for the Planning and Zoning Board. Term limits in accordance with the village council policy, and then faithful attendance at the majority. This is to make it align with the same language that was previously used. So I struck paragraph C because that's that term limit stuff, and renumbered D to C. And I think that's it. So
It seems like for practical purposes, the only thing we really changed, I mean, yeah, we made a lot of consistent, the only thing we really significantly changed was removing someone from planning and zoning if they move out of Pinehurst, correct?
what? Yeah,
That's the biggest change we've made, other than making language consistent from page to page, paragraph to paragraph. The most significant change we seem to have made was if somebody on P and Z moves.
the full-time, yeah, so to summarize the changes, add the full-time requirement for extraterritorial jurisdiction members, full-time resident requirement. Any members instead of the members, when we talk about ETJ, update the general statute references in the various locations where they occur.
But a lot of cleanup.
Yeah.
I had one last question, if there's still time. Under Historic Preservation Commission,
Yep.
they only have 7 members, but they still have a quorum of 5, right?
At 4.
4.
4?
Thought
Did I
it
say
said that.
5? 4.
You said 4.
4.
It says 4.
Number 4.
Yeah, it's 4 in the red lining under 31.71, Jane?
Minimum of
That
4
changed,
voting
yeah.
members must be present.
Okay, all right. So my question was going to be about whether the majority of meetings, rather than 80%, which they had before, is, I mean, I think we do want to be consistent on those kind of points between the Planning and Zoning Board and the Board of Adjustment, but the Historic Preservation Commission is a separate thing. So I don't see the need for the exact same consistency there. in the verbiage, and maybe if you haven't got as many people, it's more important that they do attend 80% of the meetings. I don't know.
Trying to recall where the 80% came from. I don't remember it, it's been there for sure. It hasn't been I think there have been some cases where attendance at that particular board, there were some people who had trouble with that, so maybe they set a high threshold some years ago to make it pretty clear that people need to attend. But again, most of the time, everybody's attending our boards and commissions. I'm very
And it's the
consistent on
same,
that.
I think
So
it's
don't
kind
know
of the
whether-
same situation. It's a 2-year term, and
Yeah.
they're
Jeff,
all there for the right reasons. They're volunteers. They want to be there. If they're falling short, they know it, and
Right.
they're not.
is there anywhere else in our personnel policies or whatever that 80% is a threshold we have? I can't think of where it might have come from to match.
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah. I think, Jane, we're best to leave it consistent with the rest of the documents. And it is a high number, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
But I don't think we're experiencing that problem right now. And with 2-year terms and chairs and staff members being mindful of the need to have appropriate members there, we should hear about any problems that might come up.
So these are pretty simple changes. We'll bring it back to you at your next meeting, and hopefully we'll
Okay?
be ready for approval then.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I think it's good as you're leaving. I know Doug Willardson's been involved now in some of this. That we're cleaning up and updating records and policies a bit at a time in an appropriate way, and that's always good for the future as well as the immediate present.
What do you do
Can
on a
we,
video?
with the edits that we just talked about, can we approve that now, or do we have to wait until those edits are done? Can we approve right now with what we talked about here, with the edits we've described, or do we need to wait until all those edits are done?
We could try if somebody wants to make a stab at a motion.
I'd rather not do
Bring it
that.
back.
I understand your point
Yeah.
in trying to save some time, Jeff. I think we need to make sure that the famous Ts are crossed and the Is are dotted, and
Yeah.
it should come back to us with a quick action next time.
Be here till Thursday trying to do.
We started with just a kind of a benign suggestion, and we got to all this. I guess the point I'm trying to make is it's not really a pressing issue, I don't think, so we can bring it back.
Okay. That'll bring us to other business. I'll make a note of the fact that we have public facility and naming policy in the work session, streetlight policy, discussion of the Metropolitan Planning Organization, an update on Dornock, plan for the work session. But is there anything else to raise here in the regular meeting?
I have some issues. We don't have any, in the work session, we don't have any other business part. So I have a few things I'd like to educate myself on and share with my
Well, if
fellow
it's for the
council-
work session, why don't we do it in the work session? You want to add some?
You're going to add a section on the work session that will deal with other business?
Sure, we can, I mean, if it's work session discussion stuff, we wouldn't raise any decisions there, but if you have an item
I
you
don't
want to
have
discuss.
anything let me just see if I have anything for a decision. And you all can tell me if I haven't. We had some discussion about items that we might want to include in a recommendation to our legislative delegation.
Yes.
And I don't know if that's a business matter to discuss now or to discuss in the work session.
I think here,
Okay.
it's all right.
Well, I just,
Then we're talking, so everybody's clear, are you talking about appropriations issues, which
Yes.
we've
will
talked
we
about,
exchange
or,
emails on that?
The budget.
and/or priorities and that sort of thing?
Yeah,
So-
going back to the various comments some of us had, I just wondered if there was a consensus as to where we are on it. There was a lot of emails flying
Ben,
around.
with respect to appropriation issues?
Yes,
Okay. I don't know that we have, I've made a couple of suggestions on that. I think Lydia may have, maybe everybody did. Maybe we should compile that together, Jeff, and then make a formal response.
do we have is there a time thing here we have to get back to?
I don't know that I've seen anything that looked like it. I mean, I've seen like thought starters, not really
Yeah.
suggestions.
That's why I'm raising it.
Well, I'll throw a couple out there for
Yeah.
thought starters, and we can then take some time either tonight or before the next meeting to have input from everybody. But not knowing exactly how these appropriations might be categorized and what's possible, I would see two areas, both related to the traffic circle, that we could potentially request some funds for. One would be the issue of the plantings in the traffic circle that we've lost some federal funding on. It will be now our responsibility. Perhaps that's something that could find its way into an appropriation. The other part for the traffic circle would be this. As and when we start to discuss with the DOT some of the changes regarding slowing down the circle, dealing with congestion, there will be some costs to some of those things, minor, but something, and we could seek perhaps reimbursement for those issues with the DOT. And I would add to that, too, the harness track, and I think Lydia reminded us about that last time, that we received a appropriation last year for management of the harness track and to help with some of the improvements we made, and I would think that'd be on the list, too. So there's three items at least. I'm sure you have others.
Yeah, the only thing I would throw out for discussion is to whether or not there's anything related to the amenities improvement plan for downtown in general in the village that we might want to seek something for if that's appropriate. But otherwise, I concur with the harness track suggestion and the other traffic circle enhancement suggestions. So that's my.
So do I.
Jane, anything else those you had? Jeff Morgan, anything you want to add to that appropriations list? Okay.
I support what we're talking about here.
Okay, Lydia?
I know Garth Henry, the head of the driving club, is supposed to be back in town in the next few weeks and was going to talk to Mark about any other suggestions they had.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's a good point. In fact, for the track itself, I'm sure Mark would have some suggestions of things that is in the capital budget or the operating budget to deal with smaller and near-term items, but those could be specifically mentioned, perhaps as some of the ideas for the traffic circle could be specific to that area. Yeah? Does that help, Jeff? A little bit? No? Don't think
There's
we're-
something we're
Just
missing?
wonder, I mean, I guess, part of me says, if we say, hey, we want money for the traffic circle, okay, to do what? But then I recognize that last year we got $50,000 for the harness track that we didn't even ask for, and we didn't have to say for what. So we're living in a different time right now for some reason, but
did it not say paddocks? I know it said $50,000. Did
I
it
think
not
what-
say paddocks?
it said it had to be equipment or capital.
Okay.
I think what you're referencing is we didn't make the request.
We didn't make the request.
We did not.
Yeah.
No
Not
council-
not only did we not have to specify, we didn't even make the request. So
Okay, yeah. The other item,
All right, so, well, before we move on, so we have some ideas on that. I think there may have been others. If we do have more, let's funnel them to Jeff. We'll get a list together and make it go. Patrick?
just one other thing, I happened to get my vehicle property tax bill today, and I know Dana's not here, but you may be able to answer this. And I noticed that they break out the tax by county and then Pinehurst. And I wonder, is there a round number that Pinehurst receives from those property taxes? The vehicle tax?
Well,
In other words,
Pinehurst receives whatever is indicated there for Pinehurst.
So we get that money back.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's in your annual financial report.
That's what I thought. I just wouldn't, I've seen it in the property tax bill, and it's clear. I just didn't.
Yeah, the vehicle
first time I
tax
felt like that.
piece is something that all local governments can opt into, and we have historically, we had opted into that.
Oh, it's
tax.
an option. Okay. That's good to know. Thank you. That's all. The other items we can take up in the work session.
Okay. Yeah. Anything else, other business for the regular meeting? We'll move on into public comments. I'll see what the clerk has. Thank you. We have one person signed up, John Van. And John, as you're coming to the podium there. That should be on. Is there a green light? No. The gentleman coming up behind you will make that live.
Can you hear me all right now?
Yeah,
Clear?
and you're tall, and it seems to be picking up your voice very well, John. I want to thank you for the information I think you already have in your hand for us, and also for your email communication. But go right ahead. Thank you.
Well, thank you. My name is John Van. I and my wife, Roxanne, here have lived at Donald Ross Drive, 290 Donald Ross Drive, for several years now. I've been a resident of the area since 2005, but my connection goes way back to my family at Whispering Pines back 50 years ago when we joined the club here. So Mayor Strickland, members of the council, and the village staff, thank you for taking the time today to listen to the dilemma I'm faced with right now. And by the way, congratulations, Alex, on your appointment to the Planning and Zoning Commission. In 2009, 14 years ago, my new home at Donald Ross Drive was chosen to be Home of the Year by the Pinehurst Magazine for its appearance. And I've maintained it accordingly, receiving nothing really but unsolicited and uniform praise ever since. 13 years ago, because I couldn't keep deer from destroying my landscaping, I contracted for a beautiful enclosure around my vegetable garden rather than a fence around the whole property. I surrounded the garden with additional flower beds and screening from the street where it's not visible. I invite all of you to come view the vegetable garden from both the street and the backyard. You really can't appreciate the situation just from photos, but I did bring some photos that I think you might be able to use if you can't get by and take a look at those. It might help you understand the situation. If you please pass that around, that might help you, because all of you may not have a chance to come see the situation. I was made aware just before I started talking, or actually just before the meeting tonight, that there may be a solution already in the mill to the dilemma I'm faced with, and I haven't had a chance to discuss that with anybody, but I'm hoping that that may resolve the dilemma. In the meantime, what I'm about to say, I hope, might help other people faced with a similar dilemma, and I'd like to go ahead and explain the situation, because it might help everybody. I was surprised when I received 2 letters from the village on February the 10th and February 21st after building this, and the letters directed me to either remove the protective enclosure around my garden, bring it into compliance with a permit, or face substantial financial penalties by March the 28th or by April the 7th. I had not realized a permit was required to enclose the vegetable garden. And when I asked why this occurred, since the enclosure had existed without a problem since 2010, I was told that there was an anonymous phone call about the entire 200 to 300 area of Donald Ross Drive. I guess that's about a half-mile long. And multiple homes had been contacted, so I don't really know the entire gist of the anonymous complaint. And I was instructed to contact the code compliance specialist for details. So I asked for assistance on how to obtain a complying permit, and I was told the enclosure height needed to be reduced from 8 feet to 6 feet, except for the arbor entrances. I do plan on submitting a request for a permit, and I'll cut the enclosure height of the post down to 6 feet, so no problem with that. The reason I'm before the council today isn't the height of the enclosure, however, and it's not the necessity for a permit. I accept that. I didn't know that, and I guess I should have. But it's really because the wire, according to the current code, must be on the inside of the enclosure rather than on the outside. Secondarily, it's because I was told also I could not use deer net. I believe both of those situations are incorrect and that the situation really is not appropriately covered under the current code. In gathering some of the facts regarding the wire and the deer net, I contacted several landscapers, including a previous member of the council here who was himself a landscape architect and fully versed in the subject and the code. I also contacted experts from Long Fence Company in Virginia who constructed the fence around the Pinehurst Country Club for the 2014 U.S. Open to deter non-ticket holders. the editor of the Triangle Gardener regional publication, a state agricultural extension service representative, and respective planning or coding personnel from both Whispering Pines, Southern Pines, and Aberdeen. In every case, I was told that wire for the situation I'm faced with should be on the outside of the posts to achieve the purpose of keeping deer or other intruders out, rather than on the inside. Also researched standard procedures for installing garden fence with wire, and a copy of that research is provided to everyone here. All of those examples specify that wire should be outside the enclosure and not inside, and the information includes pictures showing how the garden, my garden, has done it correctly. The wire we're talking about is muted in color. It is compliant with code. It was installed in the front under the ground to keep burrowing animals out up to about 3.5 feet high. And it was fastened to stained 4x4 stained wood posts surrounded by decorative slats of wood, which I hope you're able to see in this, for aesthetic appeal. So the wire is completely compliant except for one sentence in the code. Section 913D of the code states simply, the wire is located on the inside of the fence. But it doesn't say in what circumstances. One size doesn't fit all. Wire installation inside is appropriate for privacy fences, which we need many of here, it's a controversial subject, to secure the best appearance. It's also appropriate for fences or enclosures intended to keep animals such as dogs or others inside a property. However, it is not appropriate for enclosures designed to keep intruders out of an area. That situation simply isn't addressed in our code, and it could be easily added to paragraph D2A of the code to permit the village planner the flexibility of approving wire either outside or inside the perimeter of an enclosure or a fence. A simple change that read, wire may be located either inside or outside of the fence, depending on the purpose, would take care of that. This would enable appropriate decisions by the planners during the permitting process and still provide homeowners and planners reasonable flexibility. Code does also already permit the village planner some general flexibility in paragraph D when it states, and I quote, material substitution may be permitted by the village planner where the appearance and material would result in equal or better performance. I believe that situation applies, should the council agree, as another alternative solution, since fastening the wire outside the perimeter would clearly provide a better performance to keep the deer out than inside the wire, and the appearance would remain neat as currently constructed, as you've seen. The flexible provision could also apply to the use of deer net on top of the wire up to 6 feet. Deer net is not visible until one is clearly very close to the garden. I was unable in my own research, it may be in there, to find in the code where deer net is addressed.
John, I'm going to have to ask you to
Sure.
clarify.
Almost finished.
Conclude. Thank you.
Surely. I could not find where it could not be used, and I don't understand why. The cost to remove the current wire and reinstall it inside the enclosure would be between $2,500 and $3,000 and would destroy the current appearance of the garden. Suggested alternative to cover the wood with more wood would cause existing wood to rot from the covering, detract from the appearance, and require additional time to stain the wood to match. It would be equally as expensive. Both proposals would make retaining a vegetable garden in my backyard not cost-effective and destroy the garden area. Everyone in the village, as I'm concluding, has been quite professional, polite, and sympathetic with the situation, and I believe everyone's trying to do their jobs. Everyone also wants a fair solution for homeowners and the village that doesn't waste time and money, still enabling residents to grow vegetables while keeping a pleasing appearance for the entire community. So the purpose of my appearance today is simply to request a delay in implementing the provisions of the letters until council members and the village staff have had an opportunity to listen to and review this entire situation, including what I provided in addition to my remarks. Make a site visit to my home if you can. Consider subsection 913 of the village code and make an appropriate decision or solution to the issue of fastening wire on the vegetable gardens and use of deer nets so I can proceed with necessary permit installation. Thank you for your consideration very much.
Thank you, John. You've made a number of recommendations. Staff will look at those and work with the council. Any other persons wish to speak tonight? Seeing none, there will be a motion to adjourn the regular meeting and move to the work session. Is there such a motion?
I motion to adjourn the regular meeting.
That's a motion by Pat Pizzella. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Jane Hogeman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, we'll move to the work session at 6:10.